Have you ever spent the longest stretch of your life fighting your way back to who you used to be, only to step out into the cold and realize the one person you did it all for didn't bother to show up? That word kept circling in my head as I stood under the awning at the Maplewood Recovery Center in Kingston, Ontario, with a duffel bag at my feet and $47 in my wallet. $47 and a discharge folder and the kind of February wind that finds every gap in your coat. 8 weeks. 56 days of being told I was strong, that I was worthy, that the world outside still had a place for me. And there I was, watching my breath cloud against a gray afternoon sky, watching the parking lot stay empty. My name is Walter Brennan. I am 63 years old. I worked 31 years as a heavy equipment mechanic for the city of Kingston before my hands finally got too unsteady to hold a wrench, and the bottle I'd been hiding behind my workbench finally got too heavy to set down. My wife Marguerite hadn't passed away. She'd left me. There's a difference, and the difference matters. She was very much alive in a townhouse in Belleville, 2 hours up the 401, where she had moved in with her sister and where, every Sunday at 3, she still called to ask if I was sober and if I had eaten anything green that week. She had not given up on me. She had simply, in her words, run out of room for 2 of us in one body. It was my daughter, Adeline, who was supposed to come. Adeline had driven me to Maplewood 8 weeks earlier on a frozen morning in December. She had cried in the driver's seat of her Honda Pilot. She had held my face in her hands at the front desk and told me that when I came out, things would be different, that she would be there, that her husband Marcus agreed it was time for me to come home and have Sunday dinners again with her and the kids. I had clung to that picture like a man clinging to a piece of driftwood. For 8 weeks I had thought about my granddaughter Poppy, who was 9, and my grandson Felix, who was 6, and the way Felix had once fallen asleep against my shoulder during a Senators game even though he didn't understand hockey yet. I had been good for them. I had been good for Adeline. I had done the steps. I had sat in the circle on plastic chairs and said my name out loud, and said what I had done and what I had failed to do, and I had meant every word of it. And now the parking lot was empty. I checked my phone. The screen was cracked from a fall I didn't remember taking, sometime back in October. There were no missed calls. There was one text from Adeline, sent at 11 that morning, which simply read, "Something came up. Marcus will explain. Sorry, Dad." That was it. That was the whole message. I read it 3 times. I read it a 4th time, slower, like maybe the words would rearrange themselves into something that made more sense. Marcus will explain. My son-in-law Marcus, who had not spoken more than 10 words to me in the last 2 years. My son-in-law Marcus, who ran some kind of investment shop out of a strip mall in Whitby, and who always smelled faintly of cologne and condescension. He would explain. I sat down on the cold concrete bench by the front door, and I felt something break very quietly inside me, the way ice breaks under a boot in early spring. Not a crash, a small, splintering sound, a sound only I could hear. A nurse named Janelle came out to check on me. She had been kind to me the whole time I was inside. She asked if I had a ride. I told her my daughter was running late. The lie came out easily, which scared me a little. Janelle nodded, pretending to believe me, and went back inside, and I sat on the bench and watched the cars on Princess Street roll by with their headlights already on at 3:30 in the afternoon, the way they do in February in eastern Ontario. I thought about taking a bus. I thought about calling Marguerite. I thought about a lot of things, including, for a long, ugly moment, the LCBO 3 blocks down. The thought came and sat down beside me on the bench like an old friend, and I let it sit there because I knew I had to look at it square. 8 weeks of work, and there it was, smiling at me. Just one. Just to take the edge off. I closed my eyes and I said the serenity prayer the way Janelle had taught me, and when I opened them, the thought was still there, just a little quieter. And that was when I heard a man's voice say, "Mr. Brennan? Walter Brennan?" I looked up. He was standing about 10 feet away, by a dark gray Lexus that had pulled into the lot so quietly I hadn't heard it. He was maybe 40, maybe a little older, wearing a navy overcoat over a suit, no hat, his hair already going silver at the temples. He had the kind of careful, watchful face that some men get when they've spent a lot of years learning how to read other people for a living. He was holding a small paper bag from a Tim Hortons, and he set it down on the hood of the Lexus and walked toward me with both hands open, the way you approach a dog that might bolt. "I am sorry to come up on you like this," he said. "I have been trying to figure out how to do this for 2 days." I stood up. I was taller than him, but I felt small. "Do I know you?" "You did," he said. "A long time ago. You probably don't remember me. There is no reason you would. My name is Desmond Akhtar. In the spring of 1998, I slept on your couch for 11 nights in a row." I stared at him. "I was 16, he said. "I had just been kicked out of my foster placement in Ottawa. I'd hitchhiked down the highway and got off at a truck stop near Kingston because the driver said he wasn't going any further with me crying in his cab. You were the night shift supervisor at the city garage. You found me trying to sleep behind the dumpster. You didn't call the police. You didn't call children's services. You took me home. The wind picked up. I felt it on the back of my neck. You drove me to your house on Patricia Street," he said. "You introduced me to your wife, Marguerite. You told her, 'This boy needs a place for the night.' And 11 nights later, when my caseworker finally found a real placement for me, you put $200 in my coat pocket and you said, 'Don't pay me back. Pay it forward when it's your turn.'" My mouth had gone dry. I remembered the boy. I remembered him the way you remember a face from a dream you mostly forgot. Skinny, quiet, brown eyes, always reading. Marguerite had made him grilled cheese sandwiches, and he had eaten them like he hadn't seen food in a week, which, it turned out, he hadn't. "Desmond," I said. The name came up out of somewhere I hadn't been in a long time. "You read all my paperbacks. You read The Stand in 3 days." He smiled then, and his whole face changed. He was a kid for a second. Then he was the man again. "I went into a group home in Cornwall after that," he said. "Then to university in Halifax. I was the first person in my family to finish a degree. I kept going. I went to law school at Dalhousie. I have been a corporate litigator in Toronto for 14 years now. I made partner at my firm 3 years ago. None of that would have happened if you had called the police that night, sir. None of it." I sat down again. My legs would not hold me. He came over and sat on the bench beside me, and he was quiet for a minute, letting me have the moment. "How did you find me?" I finally asked. "I have been trying, off and on, for years," he said. "I always meant to come find you and say thank you. I am ashamed it took me this long. But the reason I am here today, Mr. Brennan, is not just to say thank you. I am here because of your son-in-law." I looked at him. "Marcus Whitfield," he said, watching my face. "That is correct, yes? Married to your daughter, Adeline. Has a financial advisory firm called Whitfield Wealth Group out of Whitby, Ontario." "Yes," I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. Desmond reached into the inside pocket of his coat and took out a thin manila envelope. "I'm going to ask you to listen carefully," he said, "before you react. Can you do that?" I nodded. I think I nodded. I am not sure my body was doing what my brain was telling it to do anymore. 3 months ago, he said, a junior associate at my firm flagged a transaction for me. We do regulatory work for a credit union with branches across eastern Ontario. The flag was on a power of attorney document executed by a man named Walter James Brennan. The signature was authorized for the transfer of a residential property at 422 Patricia Street in Kingston, and for the liquidation of a registered retirement income fund worth approximately $311,000. The cold got colder. "The power of attorney," he said carefully, "names Marcus Whitfield as the attorney, in fact, on the grounds that Walter James Brennan is, quote, unable to manage his own affairs due to substance dependency and incapacity. The document is dated December 14th of last year. It was witnessed by a paralegal at a Whitfield Wealth Group office. The signature on it is yours, Mr. Brennan, or it is meant to look like yours." I could not speak. "Did you sign that document?" Desmond asked, very gently. "Take your time." December 14th. That was the day Adeline drove me to Maplewood. I had been shaking so badly that morning that I could not hold a coffee cup. They had given me Ativan in the intake room. I remember a clipboard. I remember Marcus, standing in the corner of the office, talking quietly with a young woman in a blazer. I remember Adeline crying. I remember signing something, but I had thought it was the consent for treatment. "I signed something," I said. My voice came out hoarse. I thought it was the admission paperwork. Desmond closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, there was something hard in them that had not been there before. "Mr. Brennan," he said, "I am very sorry to be the one to tell you this. I think you have been defrauded, and I think your daughter may not know." The wind blew across the parking lot. Somewhere a city bus hissed to a stop. The world kept going. But for me, time had folded in on itself, and I was sitting on a bench in 2026, and I was also sitting on my couch in 1998, watching a skinny brown-eyed boy fall asleep with a Stephen King paperback open on his chest. "He sold the house?" I whispered. "The house is listed," Desmond said. "Asking price is $640,000. The listing went up the week after you went into treatment. The RRIF has not been liquidated yet, but the transfer order is dated for next Monday." I put my face in my hands. "Mr. Brennan," Desmond said, and his voice was steady, "I want to help you. I would like to drive you somewhere warm. I would like to buy you a coffee and a sandwich, because I do not think you have eaten today. And then, if you will allow it, I would like to be your lawyer, pro bono, for as long as this takes. Because 30 years ago, you put a kid on his feet who had nobody, and I have been waiting a long time to be in a position to do something about that." I do not know how long I sat there with my face in my hands. When I lifted my head, the sky was darker. Desmond was still beside me. He had not moved. I got into the Lexus. I ate the sandwich. It was a turkey club from Tim Hortons, and I do not think anything has ever tasted as good as that sandwich did, sitting in the warm cab of that car with a man I had not seen in 28 years, driving me down Princess Street. We did not go to a hotel. Desmond had already, apparently, called a colleague of his who lived in Kingston, a retired Crown attorney named Helena Boudreau, and she had a guest room and she was expecting us. She met us at the door of a stone house in Sydenham Ward with a pot of soup on the stove and the kind of brisk kindness that did not require me to explain anything. She showed me to a bedroom upstairs with a quilt on the bed and a window that looked out over a snowy garden. She told me that breakfast was at 7 and that there was a phone on the nightstand if I needed anything in the night. I sat on the edge of that bed for a long time. I did not unpack. I held my phone in my hands and I read Adeline's text again. Something came up, Marcus will explain. I called her. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I left a message. I said, "Sweetheart, it is your father. I am safe. I am with a friend. Please call me when you get this. I love you." I did not say anything else. Then I called Marguerite. It was almost 10 o'clock at night. She picked up on the second ring. "Walter," she said, "are you out?" "I am out," I said. "I am sober. I am safe. I need you to listen to me, Margie. I think Marcus has done something." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. And then my wife of 38 years, who had run out of room for 2 of us in one body, said very quietly, "I have been afraid of this for 6 months. Tell me what you know." I told her everything Desmond had told me. I could hear her breathing on the other end. When I was done, she said, "Adeline does not know. I would stake my life on it." "How do you know?" "Because I am her mother," she said. I asked her if she would come down to Kingston. She said she would be on the road by 6 in the morning. I did not sleep much that night. I sat by the window, and I watched the snow start to come down again, soft and steady, and I thought about Felix and Poppy. I thought about the way Felix said grandpa like it had 3 syllables. I thought about how I had almost lost the right to be called that, and how I had clawed it back over 56 days in a building on Princess Street, and how a man I had given a couch to in 1998 had walked into a parking lot and given it back to me again. The next morning in Helena Boudreau's kitchen, with Marguerite sitting beside me holding my hand for the first time in 2 years, Desmond Akhtar laid out what he proposed to do. He was going to file an emergency application in Ontario Superior Court to revoke the power of attorney. He had already, on his own time and his firm's dime, hired a forensic document examiner who was prepared to testify that the signature on the December 14th power of attorney was inconsistent with my signature on every other document on file with the City of Kingston, the Ontario Ministry of Transportation, and the Canada Revenue Agency. He was going to put an injunction on the sale of the house. He was going to freeze the RRIF. He was going to file a complaint with the Financial Services Regulatory Authority of Ontario regarding Marcus's conduct. And, if the evidence supported it, he was going to refer the file to the Ontario Provincial Police's anti-fraud unit. "Your daughter," he said to me, "is going to have to make a choice. I want you to be ready for that. Whatever she chooses, I want you to be ready." Marguerite squeezed my hand. Adeline called me back at 11:15 that morning. Her voice was tight and small. "Dad," she said, "I am so sorry." Marcus said you had asked him to handle the pickup, and that you wanted some space from the family for a few days, and that you were going to a sober living facility he had arranged in Belleville. I felt awful, but he said it was what you wanted. Where are you? Are you all right? I closed my eyes. Sweetheart, I said, I need you to come to Kingston. Today, if you can. I need you to come without Marcus. There are some things I need to show you, and I need you to see them with your own eyes, not through your husband. Can you do that for me? She did not ask why. She did not argue. She said, I will be there in 3 hours, and she hung up. She got there in 2.5. She had left the kids with her mother-in-law and told Marcus she was going Christmas shopping in Toronto. She walked into Helena Boudreau's kitchen in her parka, with her car keys still in her hand, and when she saw me, sober and steady, and sitting upright at a kitchen table with my wife on one side and a stranger in a suit on the other, she burst into tears. I let her cry. Then I asked her to sit down, and then Desmond, very gently, with the patience of a man who had spent his whole career explaining hard things to frightened people, walked her through the documents. I watched my daughter's face the whole time. I watched her go from confused, to skeptical, to pale, to something I had never seen on her face before, which was the look of a person realizing that the man she shared a bed with had been lying to her for longer than she could measure. He told me, she whispered, that you had agreed to sell the house. He said the proceeds were going to go into a trust for Poppy and Felix. He said it was your idea. It was not my idea, sweetheart, I said. He said you had a relapse on day 4, and you wanted no contact, and that was why you weren't taking my calls. Adeline, I said, I never had a relapse. I never refused your calls. I was waiting for them, every Sunday. She put her hands flat on the table, like she was bracing herself against something, and she sat very still for a long time. Then she said, What do you need me to do? What I needed her to do was the hardest thing a daughter can be asked to do. I needed her to go home that evening, act normal, and quietly photograph every document in Marcus's home office that referenced me, the house, or any of my accounts. I needed her to do it without him knowing. Desmond explained, carefully, that this was within her rights as a co-resident of the home, and that the documents would be admissible. He explained that we had to move quickly, before the RRIF transfer cleared on Monday. She did it. She did it that night, after the kids were in bed, while Marcus was in the garage on a phone call with someone who, it later turned out, was a real estate lawyer who had been quietly removing Marcus's name from a trail of recent transactions involving 3 other elderly clients of Whitfield Wealth Group. My daughter, who had cried the day she dropped me off at Rehab, sat in her husband's office with her phone on silent and photographed 43 pages of evidence. She drove back to Kingston the next morning. She handed Desmond a USB drive. The rest happened fast, the way things happen when a good lawyer gets a gift. The emergency application was heard on Friday morning at the Frontenac County Courthouse. The power of attorney was revoked from the bench. The injunction on the house went up that afternoon. The RRIF was frozen by Monday. By the following Wednesday, the Ontario Provincial Police had executed a search warrant on the Whitfield Wealth Group offices in Whitby, and what they found there was bigger than me. There were 3 other clients. One of them was a widow in Oshawa who was 81. One of them had already lost her house. Marcus was charged with fraud over $5,000, forgery, and uttering a forged document. He hired a good lawyer. He took a plea. He got 4 years in a federal institution, and a lifetime ban from the financial advisory profession, and a restitution order that he will be paying off, with his prison wages and whatever he earns afterward, until he is past the age I am now. Adeline filed for divorce 3 weeks after his arrest. I was the one who drove her to the lawyer's office. Felix sat in the back seat, eating a granola bar, asking me why his dad was on a long trip. I told him that some people need a long time alone to think about choices they have made. He nodded the way a 6-year-old nods, accepting the answer for now, and asked if we could go to the duck pond after. We went to the duck pond. Marguerite moved back into the house on Patricia Street the first weekend of April. She brought 1 suitcase. She said the rest could come later. The crocuses were up in the front yard, the way they always are in Kingston in April, even when it snows on top of them. I am writing this in November of the same year. It is almost a full year now since Adeline drove me to Maplewood. I have not had a drink. I go to a meeting on Tuesday nights at a church basement on Johnson Street, and I sponsor a younger man named Trevor who is 41 and a paramedic, and who reminds me, sometimes, of myself at that age. I see Poppy and Felix every Saturday. They have their own bedroom upstairs, with the quilt Marguerite made them. Felix can name every player on the Senators roster now. Poppy is reading The Hobbit. Desmond Akhtar comes for dinner every couple of months when he is in Kingston for work. He brings his wife, Priya, and their 2 boys. Marguerite makes a lasagna. We do not talk about what happened, mostly. We talk about hockey, and the boys' school, and the cottage Desmond and Priya are building on Stony Lake. Sometimes, when he is leaving, Desmond will put his hand on my shoulder, and we will look at each other for a second, and neither of us will say anything, because nothing needs to be said. I want to tell you a few things, friend, before I close this out. Because I know some of you watching this have a Marcus in your life. Some of you have an Adeline who has been told things that are not true. Some of you have been sitting on a bench in a parking lot in February, wondering if anyone is coming. The first thing I want to tell you is this. The people who hurt you the most are usually counting on your shame. They are counting on the fact that you will not call, that you will not ask, that you will be too embarrassed or too tired or too convinced that you deserved it to pick up the phone. Do not give them that. Pick up the phone, even if your hands are shaking, even if you do not know what to say. The truth wants out. Help it. The second thing I want to tell you is that kindness is not weakness. Kindness is the longest investment you will ever make, and you will almost never see the return on it in the moment. You will plant something in 1998, and it will not bloom until 2026. That is fine. Plant it anyway. The world does not run on the people who calculate their returns. It runs on the people who hand a sandwich to a kid behind a dumpster and then forget about it. The third thing I want to tell you is for the parents. Your children love you, even when they do not act like it, even when they are married to someone who has put walls between you. Your children are still in there, behind those walls. Reach for them anyway. Be sober when they reach back. That is the only job, in the end. Be the version of yourself that they can come home to. And the last thing I want to tell you is for anyone who is sitting on a bench somewhere right now, in any city, in any season, with $47 in your wallet and no ride coming, stay on the bench. Do not go to the LCBO. Do not get on the wrong bus. Stay on the bench, because you do not know who is about to pull into the parking lot. You do not know whose couch you slept on 28 years ago who is, right this minute, 3 minutes away from finding you again. I did not know either, and here we are.